The courthouse hallway smelled like wet wool and burnt coffee. Lily's hand was tucked in mine, small and damp, squeezing whenever a door opened. I kept my face calm because she read my expression like a weather report. If I looked scared, she would start to shake. The fluorescent lights made everyone look pale and honest, which was the cruelest lie in the building. My purse felt heavy with paperwork I couldn't outrun, and a future that depended on pens. The notice inside that folder said custody review, and my stomach kept trying to fold around those words. This wasn't a courtroom with shouting and shackles. It was a quiet office where polite people decided what kind of mother I was based on late rent receipts and a taillight I hadn't fixed yet. Dale Mercer had arranged it with a smile. My stepfather was the man neighbors called reliable. He volunteered at church, sponsored a youth baseball team, and used first names with social workers like they were old friends. After my husband died, Dale showed up with casseroles and calm advice, and everyone praised him for stepping in. They never saw the version of him that lived in private, the one who collected favors like debts, the one who called my grief unstable and my overtime hours neglect. He didn't hit walls or raise his voice. He just built a paper story where Lily needed saving from me. He started small, the way mold starts in a corner. He offered to handle bills, then pointed out mistakes I supposedly made. He bought Lily gifts, then reminded me what I owed. When I tried to pull away, he switched to concern, telling teachers I looked exhausted, telling counselors I cried too much, telling anyone listening that single moms spiral. The report he filed was smooth and professional. It listed anxiety, financial stress, one missed pickup when my car died. It left out what mattered. How he insisted on access to our home, how he monitored my phone, how his kindness always had teeth. He wanted custody, or he wanted me trapped close enough to control and call it protection. At 9 a.m. they called my case number, and I felt Lily lean into my hip like she could hold me upright. I could fight Dale for months, spending money I didn't have and time Lily deserved. I could also lose, and the thought made my vision narrow. Then a different option appeared, ugly and impossible. A door in a burning room. I hated it because it was real. I hated it because it required surrender. But I looked at Lily's cheeks, and I chose her safety over my pride. Victor Kane waited at the end of the hallway like the building had been constructed around him. No entourage, no swagger, just a man in a dark coat under harsh lights, calm enough to make everyone else hurry. He was 46, tall and broad, built like someone who once did his own violence, and now only had to remember it. Gray threaded his hair at the temples. His eyes were the color of storm clouds over Puget Sound, unreadable and steady. People didn't stare at him for long. They glanced, then looked away, as if their bodies understood consequences. I had heard his name the way you hear about earthquakes, as a fact of the region. Judges grew careful. Men like Dale negotiated around him instead of against him. Seeing him here made my throat tight with fear and hope. I was 28 and already tired in my bones. The kind of tired that comes from working double shifts and still counting quarters at the gas station. Lily was 6, still believing adults could fix things if you asked nicely. Victor didn't pretend this was a rescue story. He laid out terms the way other men laid out weapons, calmly and in full view. A legal marriage that would make me untouchable to Dale's influence. A public line no one could cross without consequences. In return, Victor would gain a wife on paper and a reason to move against anyone using my child as leverage. The custody review would vanish. Dale's calls would stop getting returned. My stomach turned, but the math was brutal and simple and time was gone. I signed with hands that didn't feel like mine. I didn't look at Dale's folder again. I looked at Lily and her worn backpack. Victor never touched me or crowded my space, and that distance felt stranger than fear. We stepped into cold rain. Graham Knox guided us to a black car and opened the door like this was routine. Lily climbed in first, humming, trusting the certainty around her. The drive north blurred into evergreens and stone walls. When the estate gates opened, I remembered tonight would be our wedding night in name, not love. Then I saw Victor's gaze flick to my purse, to Dale's file, and the truth clicked. Someone powerful wanted me silent, and Victor had decided I was valuable enough to protect, and it fit. The wedding ended the way a deal ends, clean and quiet, with signatures and witnesses, not romance. I followed Victor through the estate's hallways with my nerves pulled tight. The air smelled like stone, cedar, and expensive soap. My dress felt like a costume, and my body acted like it knew the script. The suite waited with soft lamps and staged perfection, as if someone had set the room for a performance. White sheets, a bottle of wine sweating on dark wood, flowers arranged at a distance like decoration, not celebration. Everything looked gentle. Everything felt like a trap. My throat kept tightening anyway. I moved in small increments, careful not to make sound. Inhale for 4. Hold. Exhale. Repeat. I kept my hands close to my body so no one could see them tremble. I apologized in my head before anything happened, because my past taught me that silence always meant something. Lily was asleep in a guest room down the hall, tucked under a blanket with her stuffed rabbit. I had kissed her forehead and promised pancakes in the morning, as if pancakes could anchor a life. My mind kept whispering that one wrong move tonight could become a note in a file. Another reason. Victor stood by the window with his jacket off, sleeves precise, posture still. He didn't pace. He didn't fidget. He looked like a man who had trained himself to waste nothing, not even emotion. When he turned, his gaze landed on me with measured weight, as if he could read my history. He made a small motion with his hand, not inviting, simply indicating where I should stand. My feet obeyed before my mind agreed. I stopped a few steps away, close enough to feel his warmth, far enough to escape if needed. My heartbeat sounded loud, like it wanted witnesses tonight. When his fingers found the zipper at my back, my shoulders locked. I stared at the wall and tried to leave my body without moving. I expected roughness, impatience, payment. I expected the kind of touch that turns a woman into paperwork and writes its name across her consent forever. The fabric parted, and cool air brushed my skin. That was the moment he stopped. I felt it before I understood it, the sudden stillness behind me. The scars ran in uneven rows, pale and raised, like old roads on a map, some thin, some wider, all carefully repeated there. Shame rose so fast it tasted metallic. I waited for the familiar chain, disgust, questions, punishment, or that careful quiet that comes right before a person is discarded. In that waiting, I understood something brutal. I had never been afraid of Victor's name. I was afraid of hands, and what followed. He withdrew as if contact itself could be a weapon. One step, then another, giving me air. His hands hung open at his sides, palms visible, like he was proving he carried nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded lower, stripped of command, and it asked about the maker. I couldn't turn around. My throat closed, and my eyes burned with panic I hated. A small plea slipped out anyway, the instinct to protect the truth by burying it. Behind me, I felt his attention change, not into desire, but into a colder kind of fury that built silently. He moved to the closet and returned with a robe, dark and oversized. He didn't drape it on me. He held it open behind my shoulders, careful not to brush my skin, the way someone holds an umbrella for a stranger. I took it like armor, confused and deeply unprepared. He gestured toward the bed as if it belonged to me for once. Then he indicated the door, the study beyond it, and the chair he would take. There was no sulking, no bargaining. He was deciding that my body would be left alone, tonight and later, even if I doubted. When I tried to form gratitude, it came out cracked inside my chest. I knew exactly what I was thanking him for, and that knowledge made my face burn. He paused at the threshold, as if those unspoken words had struck him somewhere old. Then he left without taking anything. The door clicked shut, and the room felt enormous. The robe smelled like cedar and a darker cologne, warm in a way I didn't deserve. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened for footsteps returning. None came. My tears started anyway. Not fear, only confusion and relief. Kindness in a place built for fear is disorienting, like stepping onto solid ground after years at sea. My mind searched for the cost, on the hidden invoice. Somewhere down the hall, Victor's presence remained, not near me, just existing. Outside, the rain softened toward dawn, and I wondered who blinked. I lay back and stared at the ceiling until my breathing matched the quiet. Lily was safe, for tonight, and that single fact kept me from unraveling completely. Tomorrow would be our first morning under new rules. I would be watched by staff, by Victor, and by my own fear. The first morning after the wedding, I woke before the house did and listened for footsteps. None came. Lily slept in the next room, sprawled like a comma, her rabbit tucked under her chin. At breakfast, the table felt too long and too quiet. I waited for permission that never arrived, then served Lily cereal with hands that shook only a little. Nora Kane, the house manager, watched from the doorway, aimed stern as a ruler, then simply nodded and let me be. Victor entered without sound, sat, and began eating as if calm were a habit. Day one blurred into corridors. I walked close to the walls, letting the baseboards guide me, because the center of a hallway felt exposed. Staff moved around me with careful politeness, never brushing my shoulders, never forcing conversation. Nora directed them with small gestures, protecting my space the way she protected the polished floors. When Victor's men passed, they looked past me, not through me, as if Victor had issued a rule I could not hear. Still, my body counted exits. Every door click made my lungs tighten. I hated that my manners were really scars, disguised as courtesy today. On day 2, Graham Knox appeared at the breakfast table with a clipboard and the patience of a man used to chaos. A new routine settled over us. Different cars for school drop-off, different gates, different times. Victor explained nothing directly. He just arranged safety like furniture, moving pieces until danger had no clean line to us. I couldn't tell if it was protection or control, because both wore the same shape. Lily accepted it as an adventure, asking for a window seat and a snack. I nodded along, pretending I wasn't watching the mirrors for Dale's face at all. Day 3 began at 6 a.m., when the house was a sleeping animal and the kitchen lights felt too bright. I scrubbed the counters in tight circles, even though they were already clean. The sponge squeaked. My hands turned red. Cleaning was something I could control when my thoughts wouldn't line up. I was halfway through wiping the same spot again when I sensed someone in the doorway. I froze, heart kicking. Victor stood there, not inside the room, just at the threshold, giving me distance like a gift he'd learned to offer. No anger, no impatience, only steady attention. He crossed to the coffee maker and prepared 2 cups, setting one near me without letting his fingers brush mine. He then sat 3 stools away at the island, leaving space like a boundary line. I waited for criticism, for the familiar lecture that cleaning meant I was failing. Instead, his silence said I was allowed to cope without punishment. I held the warm mug with both hands until my shoulders lowered by degrees. Lily patted in later, hair wild, and climbed onto a chair, asking with her eyes for normal. Victor nodded once, and the morning continued after that. By the second night, All Lily had found the garden paths behind the house and declared the roses brave. She ran ahead, then doubled back to grab my hand, tugging me toward sunlight. Victor kept his distance, walking a few steps behind, watching the perimeter more than us. When Lily stumbled on a root, my body jolted, ready for blame. Victor didn't rush in or bark orders. He simply slowed, letting me kneel first, letting Lily decide whether she wanted help. She stood, dusted her knees, and kept going, and I realized choice could exist in small moments too right then. That evening I tucked Lily into bed and read until her eyelids fluttered. She wondered why Victor always looked serious, the question innocent and sharp. I offered an explanation about men and heavy jobs, then hated how quickly I protected him. Lily rolled onto her side and shared her own verdict, insisting she had seen his eyes soften when he thought nobody was looking. She said it the way children report weather, as if it was simply true. The thought unsettled me. If she was right, my fear might be outdated, and letting it go felt like falling at once. On the third afternoon, Victor's attention shifted. He watched the gates, checked his phone, listened longer when Graham spoke. I caught the shape of strategy forming, the same calm focus he wore like armor. After Lily fell asleep, I passed the study and heard Victor speaking in a low, controlled tone, the kind that didn't invite debate. I didn't need the words to understand the request. He wanted a background file on Dale Mercer, every hospital visit, every school note, every official gap. Graham Knox answered with quiet certainty. Relief flooded me, followed by fear of what paper might prove. That evening the estate felt like it was holding its breath. Lily had fallen asleep with her rabbit tucked under her arm, and the rain tapped the windows like nervous fingers. Graham Knox appeared at the study door carrying a slim manila folder, but the weight in his shoulders made it look like a brick. He didn't hand it to me. He walked past, knocked once, and delivered it to Victor. The door closed, and the house went quiet in a new way all night. I didn't see the pages, but I felt their existence the way you feel a storm before it arrives. Victor stayed inside for a long time, the light under the door unmoving. When he finally emerged, he carried nothing, yet the air around him had changed. Later, Nora told me he hadn't eaten. A glass of scotch had sat on his desk untouched, sweating beside the folder. Victor wasn't a man who wasted time, so his stillness meant something had broken open inside my chest. The next morning, Graham left a sealed copy in Victor's hands, and I caught one page slipping free before Victor tucked it back. It listed dates like errands, emergency room, discharge, no follow-up. One visit blamed a bicycle fall, another a staircase, another an accident. School records showed absences that climbed each year, with notes about headaches and stomach pain. A counselor's line read concern, then nothing. The file didn't shout. It whispered in bureaucratic language, and that whisper made me angrier than screams had. I understood why my breathing counted in fours, why my shoulders curled when footsteps approached, why apologies fired from my mouth before thought. The paper story gave my body a translation. It explained the way I cleaned before dawn until my hands burned, as if shine could keep danger away. It explained why I watched Victor's hands more than his face, why my skin expected impact after kindness. Those weren't quirks. They were equations. Survive by shrinking. Survive by anticipating. Survive by making yourself invisible. Victor never brought the file to me, never demanded a confession, never asked me to relive what I had already survived. His rage showed up in choices. He doubled security at the gates without announcing it. He changed Lily's pickup route before I knew there was a risk. He spoke to Graham in the low tone that meant doors were closing all over the city. When he passed me in the hall, he made sure I heard him coming so my body could unclench, slowly. On the third day, a stack of books appeared on the dresser in my room, spines uncracked, no card, no ribbon, no explanation. 2 novels, a slim book of poems, and a guide to gardens, as if someone had studied what might help me breathe. I touched the covers and didn't open them. Gifts had been invoices in disguise. If I accepted something, I owed something. Still, I couldn't stop looking at them, guessing whether they were kindness or a test I could fail again. Lily found her own book that night, placed beside her rabbit as if it belonged there. It was a bright story about a girl and a stubborn fox, full of pictures and nonsense courage. Lily climbed into my lap and turned pages with sticky fingers, narrating each scene like she was hosting a show. Her laughter echoed down the hallway, and for the first time the estate sounded like a home. I noticed Victor at the corridor's end, watching without approaching, and his shoulders eased. The warmth didn't last. The next day I saw Graham in the foyer with a phone pressed to his ear, his jaw tight. Victor stood steps away, listening, then giving instructions that made the staff move faster. I didn't need details to sense the shift from healing to hunting. Victor wasn't thinking about family bonds. He was thinking about access routes, weak points, mail, calls, messages through third parties. In his world, predators tested fences first. He was rebuilding the fence around Lily and me. That afternoon, Victor took a call in his study with the door half closed. I heard only fragments, a familiar, cheerful cadence on the speaker, the kind that pretends it's harmless. My stomach dropped, recognizing Dale's polished tone even without words. When Victor ended the call, he stayed still for a moment, then asked Nora to prepare tea and asked Graham to update the visitor log. Dale wanted to see Lily. Victor agreed, not because he was fooled, but because he needed to see Dale. By evening, the house shifted again, subtle as a change in temperature. Extra cars appeared near the gate. A tray of glasses was polished twice. Nora walked the halls with clipped steps, and staff spoke in lowered voices. I told myself it was protocol, yet my body remembered what guests like Dale cost me. The careful smile, the closed door, the mess you cleaned alone. Lily drew at the table, and I felt relief that Victor believed me, and dread about his next move tomorrow. By noon, the estate was preparing for a guest the way it prepared for a threat. The gates groaned open and shut for checks, and each sound made my shoulders twitch. Nora had staff moving with extra care, as if silence could be a shield. Graham Knox stood in the foyer with an earpiece, scanning the drive, measuring seconds. Lily colored at the table, humming, while my body counted exits. When a black sedan rolled through the arch, my mouth went dry. I recognized Dale Mercer before the door opened, not by his face, but by the way the world made room for him. He stepped out in a gray suit, smile ready, hands relaxed like a man arriving to help. From far away, he looked respectable. Up close, his eyes moved first, mapping power, searching for the person he could bend. His shoes were too polished for a morning like this. His handshake lingered too long on Victor, trying to manufacture familiarity, testing whether respect could be demanded instead of earned. Lily saw him and froze, crayon hovering. She folded inward as if shrinking would make her safe. She slid off chair and pressed into my side, hiding in my sweater. My instinct flared, and I hated the smallness it woke in me. I reached for her and felt my own hand hesitate, old training whispering that comfort could be punished. Dale's smile brightened when he noticed her fear. He greeted Victor with practiced warmth, then turned that warmth on me, the kind that sounded like love and felt like ownership. Victor offered only the courtesy of a host. He placed himself between Dale and the hallway to Lily's room, casual enough to look natural, exact enough to be unmistakable. Graham stayed within sight, and staff drifted through on quiet errands, witnesses disguised as routine. Dale's gaze flicked toward them, then back to me, recalculating. We moved to the dining room for lunch. Victor chose the seats the way he chose battle lines. Dale faced the doors. I sat where I could see Lily, and Lily sat beside Nora with fruit she barely touched. Dale talked the whole time, painting himself as concerned and reasonable. He mentioned my grief and exhaustion, how single mothers sometimes unravel, and he wrapped it in compassion. He wondered whether I had been eating or sleeping, as if my body were evidence. He glanced at Lily and described her as sensitive, influenced, and in need of steadier routines. He suggested that a calmer household, meaning his, would help her thrive while smiling. Each remark pressed a bruise. My breathing slipped back into counts. Dale reached across once, resting his hand near my wrist, a gesture that looked gentle and felt proprietary. My skin went cold. Victor's eyes tracked it. His face stayed still, but the air sharpened. Dale withdrew with a smile, pretending he hadn't tested a boundary. After lunch, Dale asked for private time, calling it family business and implying it would help Lily. The threat lived inside the implication. He could make paperwork disappear or multiply. Victor agreed with a calm nod and walked us to a sitting room, then stepped away. Graham took position outside the door, visible through a glass panel, stance wide and final. Victor didn't speak to me, yet the message landed. I had an exit. I saw Victor's eyes flick to my hands, and then to Graham, and understood I had to move to be heard. Inside, Dale lowered his voice and let his mask slip a fraction. He spoke about the custody review as if it were a leash he still held. He spoke about my stability as a rumor he could spread. He commented on my weight, correcting himself into a compliment, like he was grading me. He kept one ear tuned to the door, the house protecting him. I counted the seconds, listening for boots shifting outside like a steady metronome. My body began to shake, silent and relentless. I didn't argue or explain. I stared at the rug seam and waited for consequences. When the door finally opened, he walked out cheerful, performing innocence for the house. The sedan left, gravel crunching, gates closing. Only then did my legs weaken. I stood by the window, arms wrapped around myself, trembling like fever. Lily watched from the doorway. Eyes and I forced my voice steady so she wouldn't break. Victor stopped in the doorway, not touching, not crowding, and told me with businesslike finality that Dale Mercer would never step onto this property again. Relief cut through me, followed by the question I couldn't shape. How could he promise that against a man built on leverage? Victor answered without drama. He had read enough to know what Dale was, and he had seen enough today to confirm it. Dale's access was finished, his influence over Lily finished, and my safety not negotiable. My chest loosened because being believed was medicine. Then my phone chimed. An email from Dale's law office referenced an immediate CPS fitness review and requested updated visitation terms. The countdown had started. Weeks after Dale's visit, the house felt quieter, but not looser. Gates stayed locked. Cameras blinked. Graham's men rotated like shadows. My phone still collected polite legal emails that tried to sound like concern while measuring me as a mother. Inside, though, mornings had warmth again. Lily's shoes lined up by the door, her drawings taped to the fridge by Nora with stern pride. I started hearing small sounds, spoons clinking, a kettle sighing, without flinching every time. Safety was becoming routine, and that scared me, because routines can be taken away. I reminded myself calm did not mean Dale had surrendered. Victor changed first, in ways so small they could be missed. Before entering a room, he made noise on purpose. A knock, a cough, a slow step that let my nervous system prepare. The first time I noticed I hadn't jumped, I felt embarrassed, and then oddly proud. He stopped giving instructions about where I should sit or stand. He opened doors and waited, letting me choose whether to pass. When his men needed me for paperwork, he stayed nearby without hovering, like a wall that didn't press. Even his silence shifted. It became space, not threat. And I breathed easier. One morning I reached for the coffee pot before he did. My hand froze midair, waiting for correction that used to come from men like Dale. Victor was at the counter, reading messages, his face unreadable. I poured anyway, the stream dark and steady. The world didn't punish me. No one commented. My shoulders lowered a fraction, like a tight knot loosening. The next day I poured again without looking over my shoulder. It was ridiculous that a cup of coffee felt like freedom, but it did. I believed my body could learn new rules, one sip at a time. In the hallways, I practiced taking up space. I would step away from the wall, then feel a magnetic pull back to the baseboard. Some days I only made it 3 steps, other days, 5. Victor never pointed it out. He simply walked at a respectful distance, letting me fail and try again without being watched too closely. Nora, surprisingly, began leaving fresh flowers on a console table I passed each day, as if marking progress. I realized healing wasn't dramatic. It was repetitive, private, and stubborn. Each small victory felt quiet, but it changed how I carried Lily's backpack. I tried cooking on a Tuesday, telling myself it was normal to feed your family with your own hands. The kitchen staff hovered, unsure whether to help, and so I sent them away with a smile that felt borrowed. I burned the first pan of chicken, oversalted the sauce, and almost cried when Lily asked if it was supposed to look like that. Victor ate every bite with the same calm focus he used for business. Lily giggled at his seriousness and stole a piece from his plate, fearless. Tonight we were 3 people at dinner, not a case file anymore. At 8 p.m., Lily insisted on a story, then another, bargaining with sleep the way kids do. I read until her eyelids drooped, and she reached for my fingers like an anchor. Victor never entered her room. He paused in the hallway, letting his shadow fall short of her doorway, and I appreciated the restraint more than I could explain. After Lily finally surrendered, I walked out and found Victor in the living room, jacket off, sleeves rolled, watching the fireplace as if it could answer questions. I sat across from him, quieter than before. Calm between us felt earned. Warmth did not erase pressure. Graham reported that Dale had been calling people in Victor's orbit, asking whether the marriage was being honored, whether the terms were being met. Hearing that made my skin crawl. Dale still spoke of me like an asset that should perform on schedule. Victor listened without visible reaction, then began closing doors I didn't know existed. Contacts stopped returning Dale's calls. Messages vanished before reaching my phone. Mail was screened. Anyone who tried to carry a note for him was turned away. Victor treated Dale like a predator testing fences. Not family ever again. Quietly. By then I was safer, and that made me more exposed. Trust is a kind of hunger. Once it starts, it asks for more. I caught myself wondering what Victor wanted from me beyond paperwork, beyond optics, beyond protection. I wondered why he kept distance even when the world assumed I belonged to him now. One night I stood outside his study door, hand hovering near the wood, listening to the scratch of a pen. I realized I was no longer terrified of him. I was terrified of what it might mean if I wasn't. I breathed in and knocked. I stood outside Victor's study with my palm hovering an inch from the wood. The house was quiet enough that I could hear the distant tick of the hallway clock and Lily's soft breathing behind her door. My body wasn't panicking the way it used to. It was doing something worse, hoping. I told myself I was only here to understand the rules of this marriage, because rules were safer than feelings. But the truth pressed against my ribs. If I asked the wrong thing, I could shatter the fragile peace Lily finally had. And if I stayed silent, I might keep surviving instead of living, which felt like loss. I knocked once, then waited until his low acknowledgement reached me through the crack. I stepped in and stopped just inside, keeping the doorway at my back like an exit sign. The study smelled of leather and ink. A single lamp pooled light over reports and a closed laptop. Victor sat behind the desk, sleeves rolled, hands folded, as still as if he'd been carved to match the furniture. He didn't tell me to sit. He watched, giving me room to decide, and I realized that even this pause was a kind of care. My throat tightened anyway, because in my life, silence before a man's answer was never gentle. I took a breath and let the question rise without dressing it up. Weeks had passed and he still kept distance like a promise, not a punishment. In my head, marriage had always meant access. Men like Dale treated a ring as a receipt, proof that my body came with the deal. Even before him, I'd learned that touch was collected, not offered, and refusing it only made the cost higher later. So I asked Victor why he hadn't reached for me, why he hadn't taken what everyone assumed he bought. I kept thinking of Lily asleep down the hall, and how my choices were always graded as motherhood too. Victor didn't flinch at the bluntness. He leaned back slightly, eyes steady, and answered the way he handled everything that mattered, with plain precision. He told me that my fear made sense, but it didn't make the rule true. Being his wife on paper didn't give him the right to cross my boundaries. He said permission was not a thing you assumed, it was a thing you received, and if it wasn't given freely, it wasn't permission at all. He separated the word husband from the word entitled. He reminded me control was simple for him, but restraint was chosen, and he would lose me before he harmed me ever. The words landed like a new law inside my chest. I felt my jaw unclench without permission, and I hated how close I came to crying. Relief rushed in first, then grief, sharp and delayed. I thought of all the nights I'd braced because I believed bracing was love's entry fee. I thought of how the system had watched and written notes and still left me alone. Victor wasn't fixing my past, but he was refusing to repeat it. That refusal made me feel seen in a way that hurt, because it proved my old rules were never inevitable anyway. I left his study lighter and shakier, like someone who had taken off armor and suddenly remembered the wind. The hallway seemed wider. Even the carpet felt softer under my bare feet. I checked on Lily, smoothing her hair, watching her mouth open in sleep, and I promised myself I would protect her with the same rule Victor had handed me. Choice first. No debt, no fear disguised as love. When I turned back, I noticed Victor had not followed. He had let me have space to believe him. For the first time, I wondered what I wanted, not owed. At 8 p.m., I made tea in the kitchen, the simple act feeling rebellious. I chose the mug myself, not the finest set Nora guarded, but a sturdy one Lily liked to tap with a spoon. I carried it to Victor's study and paused, measuring my own intent. This wasn't repayment. It wasn't obedience. It was a small bridge I was laying down plank by plank. I set the cup within his reach and sat across from him, breathing steadily, letting silence mean peace. He looked up once, gentler than his voice, and warmth settled between us without asking anything. Then Graham appeared at the door, not entering, just delivering information with his posture. Victor's attention snapped from me to the hallway, and the temperature of the room dropped. I understood that danger never stayed outside for long. Victor made a brief call, and I caught only the shape of the order. Tighten routes, watch phones, report any message within the hour. Someone had started asking questions about me, about Lily, about the schedule of our lives. In Victor's world, that meant leverage. I left the study knowing his protection was bigger than affection. It was war planning. Soon he would offer me a door, and my answer would matter. Victor asked me to come to his study after dinner. The request felt like a verdict, not a conversation. Graham stood near the hall, unreadable. The lamp on Victor's desk was the only light. Papers were stacked, aligned, waiting. My stomach tightened, because orderly rooms always meant consequences for me. Lily was asleep, rabbit under her chin, unaware of legal clocks and dangerous men. I kept thinking about the CPS email and the way every adult in my past judged my love by my bank balance. Whatever Victor planned tonight had to protect her first, even if it hurt me. He didn't offer small talk. He folded his hands and looked at me the way he looked at contracts. I sensed he was forcing himself into this tone because emotion made him dangerous. In sentences, he admitted the arrangement was made without my consent, and he had accepted it anyway. Then he described an exit, as if drawing a map on the desk between us. A secure apartment, protected and anonymous. New identification if needed. An emergency envelope with $5,000 for the first week, and ongoing support after. A lawyer to answer CPS, and a school transfer for Lily immediately. He promised Dale would never reach us, not by call, mail, court stunt, or friendly messenger. He said I would owe him nothing. No repayment, no marital obligation, no future claim. If I left, he would not punish me, pursue me, or speak of me as unfinished business to anyone. My first reaction was suspicion, because freedom had always arrived with a hook. My second was grief so sudden I tasted it. My body tried to brace for the trap. What would he demand later? What hidden line would I miss? I stared at his desk, waiting for the price. I realized no one had ever told me I could walk away and meant it. Not my husband's family after the funeral. Not Dale when he moved into our lives with casseroles and rules. Not the counselors who nodded at my eyes. The idea of leaving felt like stepping air. Victor didn't reach across the desk. He didn't soften his voice to persuade me. He sat back and let the room hold my shaking, as if he understood that permission includes permission to fall apart. The silence felt thick, but not cruel. It felt like time being handed to me. The images of Lily flickered behind my eyes. Her sleeping without clenched fists, her laughing at dinner, her asking whether roses were brave. This house was guarded, yes, but it was the first place where my boundaries were treated as real, where I didn't have to trade myself for safety anymore. So I told him, in the only way I could, that I was staying. Not because I was trapped, not because I had nowhere to go. I was staying because he gave me a choice, and because Lily deserved one home where love didn't come with bruises or bargaining again. Something shifted behind Victor's eyes, quick as a crack in ice. He didn't argue or celebrate. He simply nodded as if accepting a decision that belonged to me alone. He didn't move closer. He didn't touch. He let my choice stand without turning it into a debt for him tonight. I sat there until my breathing slowed and the tightness in my chest eased. The study clock ticked. Outside, wind combed the trees along the drive. Victor stayed with me in silence, not fixing, not asking, just present. I realized presence could be protection too, the gentlest kind of all. Later I checked on Lily, smoothing the blanket over her legs. She murmured in sleep and rolled closer to her rabbit, safe in a way she hadn't been in months. I watched her for a long minute and accepted that my life had split into before and after this offer. The next day, Graham's men rotated, and a new vehicle appeared at the gate with tinted windows. Victor pretended it was routine, but I noticed the way he scanned the driveway cameras and the way he kept his phone on the table during dinner. The world had noticed my choice. In Victor's world, a wife was not just a relationship. She was leverage. A child was more than love. She was a pressure point. I hated that truth, but I couldn't deny it. Someone had begun circling, asking questions through polite channels. Victor's calm had edges now, sharpened for defense. Safety settled over the house like a new rule. Brittle. I had chosen to stay, and now staying would be tested. Passing the mirror, I saw a woman learning to stand upright, and I wondered who would try to bend her next. The gates held, but the air watched us. That night, Victor spoke with Graham, and his decisions moved through the estate like locks clicking into place. I didn't ask for details, but I sensed surveillance tightening and enemies counting my daughter's routine as data. The offer to leave had been real, and the danger for staying had begun. At 2:30 p.m., the school parking lot looked normal. Minivans idling, backpacks bouncing, teachers waving. Lily ran toward me with a paper crown taped to her hair, and I forced my smile to stay steady. Then I noticed the gray sedan across the street, the same one I'd seen near our gate last week. A man leaned against it pretending to scroll his phone, but his eyes kept lifting to the children. When Lily reached my side, the man stepped closer, too casual, too friendly, like he already knew our names. My stomach dropped, and the air felt crowded. I saw Ms. Ramirez's expression change, the quick professional alarm she tried to hide. Before I could pull Lily back, a woman in a plain coat approached from behind the playground fence, hands empty, posture calm. She wasn't staff, but she moved with purpose, placing herself between Lily and the street. Another man appeared near my car, opening the rear door as if it had always been part of the plan. Lily looked up, confused, and I bent to adjust her crown, pretending this was routine while my pulse hammered in my throat. The sedan's engine turned over, then quieted. Within seconds we were moving, not running, just shifting like chess pieces. The woman guided Lily toward my car, and the man held the door so my body didn't have to choose between fight and freeze. I slid into the back seat with Lily, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, breathing into her hair so she would smell calm. A second vehicle pulled in front of us, blocking the street view. As we rolled away, I watched the school shrink in the window and wondered how many ordinary places were now unsafe for my child. Lily whispered questions, eyes brave. Back at the estate, the gates opened early, as if they'd been waiting for trouble. Victor met the cars in the courtyard, coat already on, phone in hand, face set into that focus that meant decisions were being made faster than feelings. He didn't ask what happened in a frantic way. He listened, nodded once, and the staff moved. Lily was escorted inside with a snack and a cartoon queued up, while Graham's team checked cameras and plates. I stood in the foyer shaking, guilt rising like bile, convinced my choice to stay had painted a target on my daughter. Victor's attention landed on me for a moment, not accusing, just assessing damage. I expected judgment because my life taught me that danger is the victim's fault. Instead, he acted as if the threat belonged to the people who created it. Lily was moved to a wing of the house with windows facing the garden, and Nora turned it into a fort-building afternoon. Lily accepted the change like a game, laughing as pillows became mountains. I smiled for her, then went to the bathroom and pressed my forehead to the sink, fighting the shame that hissed I should have left. By nightfall, Graham laid out the pattern for Victor, and I caught it in fragments. A school roster accessed by someone who shouldn't, a payment routed through a fake vendor, a security camera angle briefly disabled. It wasn't random, it was coordinated. Someone inside Victor's organization had sold a small piece of our routine, and Dale's legal pressure suddenly looked like cover for a larger play. Victor didn't rage. He redirected resources, ordered audits, and tightened access lists. Watching him work felt like seeing a fortress reconfigure itself mid-attack, walls sliding into place to protect a child's bedtime for us. The next morning, an insider was brought in quietly, not dragged, just escorted with the heaviness of certainty. He was a junior accountant with a wedding ring, the kind of man I would have trusted in a grocery line. I learned he'd taken small payments, telling himself it was harmless until it wasn't. Victor listened, then did something I didn't expect from a man with his reputation. He didn't make an example in blood or noise. He offered one chance to repair the damage because the man had a boy at home. In Victor's world, children shouldn't become collateral ever. That afternoon, Victor's calendar didn't clear. It hardened. A gathering he hosted was still scheduled. And canceling now would signal weakness to people who smelled weakness like fuel. I hated that the attack on a school day could turn into a political problem, but Victor lived in that math. He reviewed security plans, guest lists, escape routes, and media angles, treating optics as another lock. When he looked at me, he didn't command. He waited, letting the question exist in his eyes. Would I still stand beside him in a room full of predators after someone had circled my child? I went to Lily's room and watched her build a pillow fort with Nora, narrating a kingdom where villains were chased away by animals. Her laughter steadied me, then broke my heart. I couldn't hide her from the world forever, and I couldn't hide myself either. If enemies wanted to use my shame as a weapon, I needed to reclaim it first. That night, while the cameras blinked and the gates held, I stood at my closet and understood the battle wouldn't be fought with fists. It would be fought with visibility, and I would choose the shape of it. At 7 p.m., the house looked like a wedding and a lockdown at the same time. Crystal glasses waited on silver trays, but men with earpieces stood in every doorway. The chandeliers were lit, yet the curtains stayed drawn. Nora moved through the halls, checking flowers, checking exits, checking me. Lily twirled in her pajamas, thrilled by the bustle, while I tried to keep my breathing quiet. After the school scare, canceling tonight would have smelled like weakness to the wrong people. So the gathering went forward, polished and guarded. Victor watched the cameras as if they were heartbeat monitors. I stood in my closet with fabrics that cost more than my old rent, and none of them felt right. Hiding would be easier, but hiding had never kept Lily safe. I chose a simple black dress with a high front and an open back, clean lines that refused excuses. My hands trembled as I fastened it, not from cold, but from memory. Lily patted in, sleepy and curious, and climbed onto the bench to help. She brushed my hair with serious focus, then patted my shoulder as if sealing a promise. Her compliment made my spine straighten for once. When I reached the top of the staircase, the noise downstairs sounded distant, like ocean surf behind glass. I could smell perfume, liquor, and the faint bite of polished wood. Victor waited at the bottom, suit dark, expression contained. He offered his hand and I took it because I wanted to. Not because I had to. As we stepped into the foyer, heads turned. The back of my dress exposed every ridge and line on my skin, old marks catching lamplight. The room did not gasp, but it went still. I kept my shoulders back and let silence be mine. My first instinct was to cover myself, to reach for a shawl, to apologize for existing. Instead, I breathed in and held the line. These scars were not invitations for pity. They were proof I survived. People watched with the careful interest they reserved for power and scandal. I felt heat climb my neck, but I did not shrink. Victor did not pull me closer like a trophy. He simply stood beside me, steady, letting the moment belong to me. In his stillness, I felt something rare. Respect without possession. For the first time, I believed I could be seen. Carmen Vale approached with a smile sharp enough to cut silk. She was Victor's usual social orbit, rich and certain, dressed in pale gold that made her look untouchable. Her eyes moved over my back with practiced judgment, then to Lily's absence, then back to Victor, calculating what rumor would land hardest. She offered concern, the same weapon Dale used, hinting that unstable women collected scars and children suffered for it. The words were coded in elegance, but the intent was plain. My hands curled at my sides, anger rising like tidewater. I waited for the room to join her. Victor responded without raising his voice or changing his posture. He let a pause stretch until Carmen's smile began to falter. Then he stated, with quiet clarity, that my history was not a topic for entertainment, and Lily was not a bargaining chip for anyone. And he did not threaten. He simply removed Carmen from relevance. A few guests turned away from her as if she had spilled something ugly on the floor. Someone asked Victor about a shipment instead, shifting the current. Carmen retreated, still smiling, but her eyes had lost their shine. The room corrected itself around Victor's calm. After that, the night flowed again, but I felt different inside it. Conversations passed around me like river water around a rock, acknowledging my presence without drowning me. I answered questions with simple truths and no apologies. I noticed how often people tested Victor's boundaries with humor, then backed off when he stayed silent. Power here was measured by what you did not have to say. Each time someone's gaze drifted to my back, I kept breathing. I let their curiosity burn out on its own. When the last guest left, my knees nearly gave out. I held myself upright. In the bathroom, I faced the mirror and turned slowly, studying the skin I had spent years hiding. The scars looked like old handwriting, no longer a verdict, just a record. My face was flushed, my eyes bright with exhaustion and something like pride. Victor appeared in the doorway, not entering, giving me time to exist without performance. I met his gaze in the glass and felt the urge to run fade. I stepped closer to him, lifted my hand, and rested it on his chest, choosing contact on my terms. He covered my hand with his, gentle and still. Later, after I helped Lily into bed and she asked if the party was over, Nora slipped a small envelope onto my nightstand. She did not explain, but her mouth tightened with caution. The paper was thick, and the handwriting familiar, and my stomach knew before my mind did. Security had intercepted it, yet it had been placed where I could decide. Victor waited down the hall, not hovering, trusting me with my own choices. I stared at the envelope until my breath steadied. Public courage was one battle. The private one sat in my room, sealed and patient for now. Before I touched the envelope, I felt it. The house carried it the way it carried a storm, quiet but alert. Graham's team had intercepted it at the gate, scanned it, logged it, and then, instead of destroying it, brought it to Victor. Victor did not hide it in a drawer or decide for me. He placed it on my nightstand like a fact and left the room. The paper looked harmless, thick cream stock, my name in Dale Mercer's familiar slant. My stomach tightened anyway, because letters used to be leashes. Tonight, it waited, asking what I would do. My first impulse was to open it immediately, because Dale trained me to respond fast. Silence, in his world, was defiance. I could already hear the old script in my head. Explain yourself, thank him, promise to be better, keep him calm. Another part of me wanted to throw it away unseen, like a snake in the grass. But Victor's choice to let me choose made avoidance feel like surrender. I stood by the window and measured my breathing, letting Lily's soft cartoon laughter downstairs remind me who mattered. Then I broke the seal with careful hands and read standing. I read it standing up, shoulders squared, as if posture could keep my past from flooding the room. The letter began with tenderness, the kind that sounded like missing me, worrying, I remembering Lily's laugh. It thanked me for being strong, then quietly suggested I was too fragile to manage alone. It mentioned the court emails as if they were accidents, not weapons. It offered help, but the help had strings braided through every sentence. Come back. Let him handle things. Let him decide what was best. He wrote about family the way Victor's associates spoke about territory, something he controlled. The worst part was the way he apologized without apologizing. He wrote that mistakes happened, that times were hard, that he wished he could redo certain moments. No subject, no hands, no choices. Just fog. He described my fear as misunderstanding and my scars as ancient history, as if my body were overreacting. Reading it, I saw how institutions had matched his tone for years, documenting bruises as falls and silence as compliance. My anger sharpened, not into heat, but into clarity. He wanted my shame back because it kept me small and reachable so he could steer us again. I used to believe love had a price, and the price was pain. If someone hurt me and later sounded sorry, I treated the softness as proof. I learned to accept the hitting in exchange for the apology, because the apology felt like warmth. Victor shattered that math without even touching me. He showed me what careful looked like. Distance offered, doors left open, choices respected, silence that did not threaten. Once you have been handled gently, you cannot pretend roughness is devotion. Dale's letter tried to sell me the old bargain. I finally saw it as a scam today. I folded the pages neatly, as if tidiness could erase the lies, and then carried them downstairs. The fireplace in the living room still held embers from the gathering, a quiet red glow. I knelt, opened the grate, and placed the letter on the coals. Paper curled first at the edges, then darkened, then lifted into ash that drifted upward like spent breath. I did not cry or shout. I watched until my hands stopped shaking. Behind me, Victor stood near the doorway, close enough to be there, far enough to let the ending be mine and nothing else followed after. When the last corner collapsed, I exhaled as if I had been holding my lungs for years. I stood and turned toward Victor, not to ask for rescue, but to mark what I had done. I stepped close enough to choose contact, then lifted my hand and rested it against his chest. He did not grab me or pull me in. He covered my fingers with his palm, steady and warm, on waiting for any sign that I wanted distance. My skin did not flinch. For a moment, silence felt like safety, wearing a human shape, and I kept breathing. Slow. The next morning, Graham delivered another message, this one official and urgent. Dale had filed an emergency petition and requested a CPS interview window, trying to frame the school incident as proof of chaos around me. The paper felt like a hand reaching through a locked gate. Victor did not look surprised. He had a counterfile. Hospital patterns, attendance records, sworn statements from staff who had seen Dale's behavior, and security footage showing the sedan. He instructed Graham to coordinate with counsel and to log every contact attempt within the hour. As the last ash cooled, the timeline began. After Dale filed the emergency petition, time became a sound in the house. It clicked in my head with every email notification, every car that slowed near the gate. Lily asked why grown-ups were acting weird, and I told her we had meetings, the kind that decide where you sleep. She accepted that like kids accept weather, then asked if she could still have pancakes. I promised yes, even while my hands shook pouring syrup. The agency building downtown was warm and beige, the kind of place that pretends neutrality. I held Lily's backpack on my lap, although she wasn't with me. Nora kept her home, building forts and watching cartoons, because Victor refused to let my child sit under fluorescent judgment again. Victor waited 2 chairs away, not beside me like a guard, just present, letting my case belong to me. Dale arrived smiling, carrying a folder like a prop. He wore concern the way other men wore cologne. I watched him greet the caseworker with that practiced humility, the same tone he used at church. For a second, I felt the old panic, the fear that his performance would win because performances always had. Then Graham's team placed evidence on the table, neat and undeniable. There were records that showed patterns, not stories, dates, repeated accidents, school absences, notes that said follow-up recommended, and then vanished. There was footage from the school lot, the gray sedan, the man drifting too close to children, the coordinated movement when we were extracted. There were statements from staff who had seen Dale's private smile shift when Lily froze. Even the air seemed to change, as if the room finally noticed what my body had been shouting for years. When it was my turn, I stayed standing. I didn't perform tears. I described my life in plain language: grief, work, a child who needed peace, a stepfather who called control love. I spoke about how fear trains you to look compliant, how you learn to apologize before anyone asks. I didn't ask to be believed. I told the truth and let it sit there. My voice shook once, then steadied, and I realized that steadiness was also a kind of freedom. The decision came quietly. Dale's petition was denied. His request for access was restricted to a supervised process that required proof he could follow rules he had never respected. The caseworker's eyes held mine, and for the first time an official system sounded like it understood. Dale left the room still smiling, but his smile looked cracked at the edges, like plaster overwrought. Back at the estate, spring arrived as if it had been waiting for paperwork. The gardens brightened, and the air smelled like wet soil and new leaves. Lily ran along the stone path with her rabbit tucked under her arm, narrating a game where she was the mayor of a tiny, safe town. I watched her and realized I was breathing without counting. My shoulders were down. My hands were open. The house still had gates and cameras, but it no longer felt like a cage. It felt like shelter. I caught myself walking down the center of the hallway and not correcting back to the wall. I laughed once when Lily tried to teach Victor how to braid a ribbon, and the sound surprised me because it came out before I checked if it was allowed. Later, I imagined simple futures: enrolling Lily in an art class, planting tomatoes in the garden, choosing a home because I loved it, not because I was hiding. One morning I sat on the garden bench and felt the sun on my face. Victor joined me without asking the moment from me. Lily played nearby, safe enough to forget she had ever been hunted. I looked at Victor and understood that his power wasn't in fear. It was in restraint, in protection that didn't demand ownership, in choices handed over and respected. If this story hit you somewhere tender, stay with that feeling. Tell me in the comments which moment changed everything for you. And if you want more stories like this, please like, share, and subscribe right here today.